Here are some of the questions young people had about the vaccine, why it was developed so quickly, and why people don't trust it.
Knowing that a vaccine takes 5 to 10 years to actually go out to the public and stuff, how do you expect people to automatically open up to a new vaccine that only just came about in the last year and about a sudden virus that not much people know about?
So the reality is that people are choosing to be vaccinated. So today in Sheffield, 330,000 people have had the first dose, and about 165,000 have had the second dose. And that second dose number will only go up, and the number of first doses will only go up. So the reality is people are choosing to be vaccinated. The medical evidence that's available and the real world evidence that's available all says it's hugely effective, far more effective than we dared hope for 5 months ago. The how we encourage that is the long, hard, slow job of talking to people, both en masse but also one-to-one, to just address people's fears, address people's worries, make sure that people have the right information and the right facts and they're able to make a fully informed decision. There's no shortcut for that. It's just a long, hard, slow job, and that job will continue. It's the same for this vaccination as for any other vaccination program that's available, and there are obviously plenty of other vaccination programs available. So there's nothing special about this one, but given the consequences of COVID, we've tried extra hard to get high coverage on this one.
Apparently this one got produced fast because A, there was more funding, and B, more countries were focusing on it.
Yeah.
But in the usual 5 to 10 year gap, long-term effects are seen more.
Yeah, it's a fair comment, and we watched that one carefully. So the reason it was developed, well, the rationale for developing it quickly was, one, there was a need to. The usual process for developing a vaccination is that a virus starts to infect humans and becomes a thing. It becomes a significant public health problem. The epidemiologists and people of that type think vaccination is what we're going to need here. Then there's a range of, sort of basic cellular science about how how you can develop an antibody response to that virus. Then there's a series of what are known as phase 1 studies. Does it work in animals? Does it produce the right response in animals, usually rats or monkeys? Then there's a series of phase 2 studies. Is it safe to use in humans, a relatively small group of humans, vaccinated under very, very, very carefully controlled conditions? And then there's a phase 3 study, which is does it work in a large population of humans, and is it safe and is it effective? Altogether, those are the set of studies that are needed to get any medicine, and vaccination is like any other medicine, over the line in terms of the regulatory approval. And as I say, normally that's somewhere between 5 to 10 years. Here, all of those studies were kind of run in parallel, and the basic science had already been done before COVID, the thing that we call COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2, became a thing. And governments across the world poured money into this like there was no tomorrow, because it was in everybody's interest to develop an effective vaccine. So all of that happened quickly. For that reason, this vaccination was developed really, really quickly. On the specifically your question of will we see the consequences develop over a longer period? It's possible, but that's the reason why we do what's known as post-marketing surveillance. So there's a mechanism that's in place in this country. It's called the yellow card system, where when a clinician or a patient who's received the vaccination notices a side effect that they attribute, it may or may not be actually to do with the vaccination, they fill in what's known as a yellow card, and the MHRA collate all of the yellow cards and produce epidemiology on trends. So that's a sign of a functioning medicines regulatory system. It is possible that we'll see that, but I think it's fairly unlikely.
Do you think that the media is a good source of information on protecting yourself against the COVID vaccine? Or...
No, I'm an avid news watcher. You know, it's part of my role. You know, I have to know what's going on when it's going on. And what I found was there wasn't a balanced conversation. And there was a biased conversation, biased to the vaccine. And for me, that's dangerous. You know, in a free society, you need to have balanced should I say, opinions. And what I felt was there was a lot of, I feel it all the time, whether I'm traveling in a taxi or being in this interview, the biggest question that's been asked to me has been, have you had the vaccine? Not if you're all right.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when you look at where that comes from, it's people's fear, it's people's confidence, once they've had the vaccine, to be able to kind of go, right, we're on the right side of the line. There seems to be like these lines that are invisible lines that are getting drawn in society based around whether you've had the vaccine or not. So for me, that, the media have driven some of that fear and not giving us a balanced situation. I think the only time I've really seen a balanced conversation was, Piers Morgan kind of haranguing ministers and health officials.
Yeah.
But, not even that type of conversation has supported me, because I felt that his approach was completely wrong. And I don't respect Piers.
I know some of the vaccines have also ended lives with blood clots and other related things.
So the number of deaths, there have been 1 or 2 deaths that have been reported nationally, are vanishingly rare. So I think my numbers are correct. I think north of 40 million vaccinations have been, COVID vaccinations have been administered. There have been a number of deaths. They're in a handful, a few people. And for that reason, the regulator, the MHRA, have shifted their advice, and they've said that people under the age of 40 shouldn't receive the AstraZeneca vaccination. They should receive one of the other vaccinations that are available, either the Pfizer or the Moderna vaccine. And that further reduces the risk from vanishingly small to super vanishingly small. But there has been a risk. But it's important that all risks and benefits are seen in proportion. The benefit of the vaccination program is huge. The risk is really, really, really small, vanishingly small, more likely to be struck by lightning type of territory.
Last question. Do you ever see a future where vaccines will be mandatory?
It's difficult to predict. So the medical question is, should we be vaccinated or not? The answer to that is yes, unequivocally. It's had a huge positive impact. The question is how to get high proportion of the population vaccinated. Now, currently, so of the over 50s, I know the data very well. More than 90% of them have been vaccinated against COVID. That's way more positive than we dared hope for 4 or 5 months ago, which is obviously good news. There is talk about should vaccination against COVID become mandatory. And it's a political question. My view is no. I would advise against it for 2 reasons. One, it sort of messes with the principle of informed consent. So vaccination is a medical intervention. Like any other medical intervention, it's important that individuals make an informed consent decision to be vaccinated or not to be vaccinated. That takes into account all of the risks, all of the benefits on all sides of the equation. A sort of a mandation to do that messes with the principle of autonomy, and I think we do so at great peril. Second reason against mandatory vaccination is that it may cause the relatively small proportion of the population who are a bit hesitant about it to become downright resistant, and that kind of creates a problem that we don't really need to actually, and will cause us more problems downstream. Third one is that if this vaccination becomes mandatory, well, where do you stop? Why not flu? Why not MMR? Why not diphtheria or polio or all of the other things? And I personally, it wouldn't be a path that I'd tread down. It's a sort of an ethical and political question rather than a medical question, but it's certainly one that I think it will cause us a lot more problems than it solves.
A huge thank you to Sheffield City Council for funding this project, to all the young people who got involved doing the interviews and asking questions on social media, to the One Devotion for providing interview training for our young people, and of course to Safia, Martin, Greg and Lloyd for coming in and speaking to our young people.